Welcome everyone to another edition of Living with the Times. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Truma. Here we are beginning the descriptions of the Mishkan in the desert, the sanctuary that God told us to build, and it later became the prototype of the temple in Jerusalem. But once the temple was destroyed, the first and the second temple, the sages did a very creative and very fundamental, they took action. And what they did is they took all of the physical elements of the temple and they incorporated it into what we'll call the modern synagogue structure. And even more than that, they took the service in the temple, the service of the Kohanim and the Leviim, and they integrated all of the different parts of the service into our prayer services. The prayers replace the offerings. And so whole books have been written about this, but hopefully in the next few minutes, we're going to run through very, very quickly some of these ideas. So any synagogue that you walk into, on the wall that will be facing Jerusalem, facing where the temple was, you'll have the ark. And in the ark is the Sefer Torah. And outside of the ark is a curtain. And that's because in the temple, there was what was called the Kadosh Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies. And in the Holy of Holies, there was a curtain in front of it. And in that was the ark. And in the ark was the two tablets of the law and the original Torah written by Moshe Rabbeinu. And so our synagogue is replicating the Holy of Holies. In the temple, we had the menorah, the candelabrum. And today it's traditional in every synagogue to have what's called the Ner Tamid, an everlasting light. In every synagogue, there'll be either a sculpture or a hanging lamp that will be a light that's lit all the time. That represents the menorah. The offerings were offered on the altar. And in every shul, you have what's called the bima. That's the place where the Sefer Torah is read from. And in many shuls, that's where the person leading the prayers stands. The person leading the prayers, the Shliach Tzibor, so this represents the Kohen or Levi that are in charge of the services in the temple. And so instead of bringing sacrifices or offerings on the altar, we pray. Prayer has replaced the offerings. And the Shliach Tzibor and most of the men will be wearing a talit. And on the talit, there's 72 tufts of material. This represents the Kohen Gadol wore a me'il, a robe, and in the bottom of the robe were 72 pomegranates and bells. And so again, we have all of the elements of the temple translated into the modern synagogue, but also the prayers. when we pray Shachrit and Mincha, the morning prayer and the afternoon prayer, because this represents the morning offering in the temple and the afternoon offering. At first, the evening prayer was optional, and then it was accepted by all of Israel, and it became an obligation. And that's because not all of the sacrifices could be offered during the day. There were so many. And so certain of the offerings were allowed to be brought up to the altar in the evening. So the evening service represents those offerings. And then when we look at the actual structure of the prayer, so many of the elements of our prayers represent the different types of offerings. Every day we say the psalm, Mizmor LeTodah, a song of thanks. This represents the thanksgiving offering. We have a part of the prayers called Tachanun, where we ask for forgiveness. And this represents the guilt offerings. At the end of the morning service, we recite the same psalms that the Levim used to recite in the temple. On Sunday there was a certain psalm, on Monday there was a certain psalm, and we still do it to this day. In synagogues everywhere, we do the priestly blessing, Birchat Kohanim. Outside of Israel, many congregations only do it a few times a year. But in Israel, we do it every single day. And on Shabbat and holidays, we actually do it twice. And that's another idea, is that during the week, we pray 3 prayers. And on Shabbat and holidays, we pray 4 prayers. And so the additional prayer is called Musaf. And that's because on Shabbat and holidays, there was an additional Musaf offering. So there's much more that could be discussed here, but it's very, very important to understand, especially when we're reading the Torah, and there's many, many details about the structure of the tabernacle and the different offerings that were brought. And sometimes people ask, like, why do we need to know this? We don't have a temple anymore. We don't have the Mishkan. We don't have the service in the temple. Why are we learning it? And so what we're trying to give over here is that really the synagogue has replaced the temple, not just in concept. The actual structure of the synagogue is actually called a Mikdash Ma'at, a little temple, as in Yerushalayim. And all those prayers that we pray are in direct parallel to the service in the temple. And so that should give us extra inspiration that when we're learning the different portions, at the end of the book of Shemot, Exodus, almost the whole thing is about the structure of the Mishkan. And much of the book of Leviticus is about, well, what happened in the temple. And so it is very important to learn these and to understand that each one of those details has tremendous symbolism, has tremendous meaning for us even today. Even more than even today, especially today, because our prayers count, and designating a place of a holy place where we can gather and pray together as a community and to commune with God. So this is really the experience of the Mishkan and the temple.